Welcome back to the wood shop, guys. You know, it wasn't too awful long ago I got this planer here behind me, one of the most popular planers out there, and almost immediately you guys were telling me I needed to upgrade this thing with a helical head cutter, and today is that day. With the help of this one from FindBuyTool, we're going to upgrade it. Not only that, we're going to check a couple things. A lot of you said it's quieter and it's a much cleaner cut, so we're going to check all that today, so stick around. Now, before we dive too much into this thing, just a quick overview of this. It is one of the most nicest packaged tools or accessories I have ever seen. You look at this thing, that is some pretty dense foam in there, so shouldn't be any kind of damage in shipping. But you got a ton of boxes here that contain the cutters for this, and they do come to where you have to install these, so it's going to take a few minutes, and all the screws. A couple of the little tools for installing it. I'm sure it's Torx or Allen head. And of course we got the main part of it, the cutter head itself. Down in here you can kind of see that I've still got it in the plastic, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Now this comes also with a very nice set of instructions, very detailed, in color, that kind of stuff, and it takes very few tools, and the main tool being the one that comes with the planer itself. As I mentioned before, we're going to test the loudness of this before we go through with all of it, and then we'll check it at the end as well. I've got a kind of a rough piece of wood here. You see some cracks and that kind of stuff, but it's rough. We're going to test this for loudness as far as running by itself, plus, you know, bogged down a little bit with this wood. And I've just got a phone decibel meter. I'm sure there's more accurate ones out there. It's commercially bought, but I just went with this one to just kind of give us kind of an idea. You can see it jumping up as I'm talking there, so this should give us a pretty rough estimate how close we are, how much quieter we're going to be when we install a new one. And just running by itself here, this got a handy little feature on here where it tells you the loudest it got, which was 101.9 decibels. Now let's try it with the wood running through there. And quite a difference. You can see with cutting that through there, it jumped up to 114 decibels, so quite a bit of difference, you know, from just running to cutting as well. So let's jump into tearing this thing down. And I almost forgot to run this through and show you how the finished piece looks. You know, there is a bit of snipe, which really doesn't, you know, not because of the planer blades. And admittedly, mine are probably a little dull. But there is a little bit of tear out. I'm not sure if the camera is picking that up. Also, you can see, kind of hard for the camera to see, but just a couple little ridges through there, which I always say in these, as anybody would, so you're not going to really tell that. Getting it from rough to, you know, somewhat finished is kind of the key here. But this spiral head cutter is supposed to clean up a lot of that, where, you know, you're cutting out a lot of that sanding. And so let's jump into tearing this thing down, getting it installed. A couple little safety tips here. Naturally, one thing you want to do is unplug the machine. You don't want to be sticking your hands in there and potential, you know, turning that machine on. Second little tip, you know, those cutters are sharp, so wear gloves or be extra careful around them. You don't want to get yourself cut doing that kind of stuff. So the first step in this, naturally, we're going to get to these screws here. It's going to let us bring this top cover off. And very simply up next, these big red pieces you see here, we're going to take those loose. Pop this cover off. Very easily, you can see the cutter head down in there. use this. And of course, there's a lot of screws here. So I'm going to speed it up just a little bit. Somebody may not like that. But I've got a little bit of an impact driver we're going to take these loose with. I don't think it's going to cause any issues. Let's get those took out of there. Now, if you start taking that out the way I did, it's a T30. If you don't have this handle or you don't want to use it, here's the blade all the way out. I'm not going to, make you suffer through watching every one of these being taken out. But basically, if you've never seen or used these much, there is two sides that cuts. So one side gets dull, you flip it around to the other side. Once that side gets dull, you either throw them away or try to sharpen them, that kind of thing. With the new cutter head, you've got each of those cutters that can be rotated. They've got four sides. So you get a lot more usability out of that. I'll get the other cutters out of here, and then we'll move on to the next step. We've got this lock plate here that just kind of locks your head in place. Take these loose. And this is a Phillips head. I'm assuming like a machine screw. There's one out. And be sure to save these, of course. And once you do that, this piece will actually come out. Clean it up a little bit. Notice there is a spring on the back. But just keep this. You'll need it when you reassemble later on. As you can see, I've spun this cart around here. This side, we've got 3 screws. We'll go ahead and remove those. Okay, so this side is actually fairly clean for the most part. A few little dust pieces in here. But on the next step, kind of hard to tell with the picture. There's some snap rings here. We want to take those off. Then these little gears and the chain will come off. Squeeze on it. Now be careful. These things will go flying if you're not careful. It takes it off. Same here. Kind of got to move this tensioner a little bit. And then these pieces will slide off. There we go. Comes off just like that. And on this piece here, I don't know what they call it, maybe a gearbox, something to that extent. There is a teeny tiny washer behind one of those pieces you took the snap ring off, so just be careful that you don't lose that thing. But we're going to go ahead and remove this. Now you don't necessarily have to remove it completely, but you do need to get it out of the way. And you've got 3 screws here as well. Now, according to the instructions, inside here there's a shaft that kind of holds this piece in place. You can take the screw out. It'll let you remove this completely. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have to have it completely off. Just kind of up out of the way and it'll hold itself enough to where you can get to this piece. So next we got to remove this piece here. You can see it's got a helical gear on it. On the very end of that, it's got a small, we'll call it a nut, but it's basically just the end of that they've got machined. Now this is a 6mm, best I can tell. It fits really good. No, well, that was not on there as tight as I thought it'd be. Very little pressure. So anyway, once you get that piece out, there's a little bit of grease in here. We want to clean that out, and then there's a snap ring. Okay, I think we've just about got it here. Up next is this disassembly of this side cover here. So we're going to take the handle off, just kind of hold it in place. Put those aside. And then you've got 4 screws here we're going to take out. Now the next thing we want to do, we got to take these little Allen head screws out of here. And of course you've got a tensioner here. As always, be careful with that. The next thing we want to do is take this screw out, but be careful, there's a spring here. You don't want to lose that. And this just sort of gets this tensioner out of your way. And you can see that spring dangling there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove that belt. We've got a little creepy trolley somehow that's got in here. And of course, the next thing we want to do is pull this belt off. I've seen several different ways, putting a wedge in here, and we may end up trying that if this doesn't work. I'm going to try to just kind of pull the belt and twist at the same time. Hopefully it'll roll it off the edge of the pulley here. Okay, so there's the belt. Now we got to find a socket, pull this off. Might take a little bit of pressure to get this pulley off. Okay. So that was actually a little tighter than I had planned on it being. But I took the old dead blow mallet and gave it a whack or two. You know, nothing that would damage it, of course. And she's popped off there. And there is a little keyway in there that is probably, yep, it is just kind of a loose fit in there. Make sure you don't lose that. And we got one more old hateful snap ring, so hopefully we don't have too much issue. Clean this thing up a little. Try this one. If we can get this. No. So I'm going to try taking the socket that we took the nut off the pulley with. We're going to use that as kind of a beading device. Now there's only one way this thing goes in. One end's got a larger bearing than the other, so it has to come out one way. We're going to go ahead and try that. Okay. So there is the old cutter head. Quite heavy too. Okay, so now we're going to install the new cutter head. Go ahead and get it out of here. And it does have the saran wrap looking cellophane type stuff on it. And you want to give this a good wipe down because they generally cover them in some type of oil, keep them from rusting, that kind of thing. And just as a little reference, you can kind of tell the big difference in the cutter heads here. Old one and the new one. We're ready to put our new one in, and it's a good idea to go ahead and put your smaller diameter snap ring on the opposite end down here. That'll act as a stop when you're driving the new one in, so it won't go any farther and you're not having to fight with it. But I've got the new snap ring installed on this side. We'll go ahead and put a little bit of lubricant on these pieces just to make it a little easier about driving it in. Any of you mechanical guys, this is sort of like installing a camshaft into an engine, the old style anyway. Just be careful going through there. Don't want to cause any damage. So it's installed as far as driving it in there. It bottomed out against the other snap ring. Hopefully we don't have too much trouble installing the new one. And I did find a hopefully better set of snap ring pliers. I think we got it. Basically, installing this thing, it tells you in the instructions, it's just a reverse of what you've done originally. So we're going to go ahead and set the little keyway back into this shaft here. I think we got it. Now, get the pulley on. So this one, just because of the way it's made, is a little wider, of course, than the other one, so you can't really jam a piece of wood in there. At least that I can tell. I may be able to scotch it like that. But I think what I'm going to do is take this impact driver. It's not a huge amount of torque, and bump that on there like that, and I think I can hold it. Okay, now we get the task of trying to get this to slip over the pulley. That may be a chore. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to come up with a creative solution here. Now we're there. Go ahead and get these gears and chain installed again. Now you may end up having to move your roller head or your chain a little just to kind of match where you're at. And as long as everything is back where it should be, which this is, go ahead and button this side back up. Okay, now back over on this side, we've got the helical gear that goes in here again. We're going to go ahead and install that. And now would be the time to go ahead and add some grease. Mine still seems to be quite lubricated in there. It's still somewhat fairly new. And that was not in there very tight, so we're not gonna go crazy with it. And with that, we can go ahead and install this piece back in. You want to make sure everything lines up here the way it needs to. Now comes the meticulous task of installing all these cutters and the screws that come with them. The instructions say if you're torquing these down, use a wrench that has 6 Newton meters. I don't have anything like that. If you don't have that, it says to use the tool that it comes included with, and I'm assuming it kind of just self-torques in a way. It's just going to bend and not allow you to kind of strip out any of the screws. So this is what I'll be using. Probably wouldn't recommend using a power tool on this part of it. Let's go ahead and get this installed. And I almost forgot myself that little lock plate that's back here. I almost forgot to install it, so let's go ahead and get that put in right now. Now if you can see, it may be hard to tell on the camera. I think you can see it there. These are numbered 1, 2, 3, and then there's a dot, of course. but basically that gives you 4 cutting areas. Generally, I like to start at the number 1. That way, if I turn any of these, I know which position I should be at, and then I've got a sharp edge. Let's go ahead and get the first one installed, and then we'll do the rest of them. So I didn't want to show every single one of these being put on. I just get bored, and trust me, it was. I bet you it's took me close to an hour just to get all these in here, but I got you to the last one anyway. I did have an issue with a couple of the screws they sent. I don't know if maybe they were just threaded slightly off, but they started to go in, and then they were kind of feeling like they were cross-threading, so I just stopped that immediately, which luckily the company probably had that in their foresight and did send a few extras and a few extra cutters. Okay, we're at hopefully kind of the last step. Get the cover back on here, and then we'll give it a little initial run and make sure nobody dies from blades flying out. So I've got everything buttoned back up. I got it plugged back in. Let's do a first initial run to make sure nothing's loose, that kind of stuff. And what better way to turn it on and maybe tear it up. So let's see what it does. It is loud. I'll say some people told me that's quieter. I don't know if I believe that or not. Let's get the old decibel meter on there and see what it says. So let's try it out. So we were at like 101 before cutting anything with the old blades, and so this is 100.8. So if it's quieter, it's just a very little bit. So let's see how it does with a piece of wood. I found another rough piece of wood. We'll run that through there and see how it does. So that's a little crazy. So it actually never got above the 100.8 we just ran on initial startup, and it planed down the board. And as you can tell, that is pretty smooth. I do have still a little bit of tiny tear out right here where this knot is, but the grain changes direction, so you're more than likely that's going to be the area you're going to get tear out anyway. So guys, there you have it. We have successfully installed this beast. And I tell you, it's actually surprised me. It's a little bit tedious to put it in, at least for me. I kept having some issues with the snap rings, and that stuff kind of wears on you. There were a lot of cutters to install on that thing. But overall, I think it was definitely worth it. I don't know that I'd want to do it again, but the results are great. I don't even feel any snap. Like I said in the beginning, the knives really don't have anything to do with that, but it's ultra smooth. A little bit of tear out, as I mentioned, around the knot, but your grain runs different directions, and you're kind of going to get that no matter what. But either way, I think it's going to be a great tool. Long term, it's going to be a little hard to judge that right now. I have to get some use into it, of course, but everybody tells me these are great. And speaking of that, if you're interested in this FindBuyTool cutter head, I'll leave a link in the description. As always, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next video.